We're starting another chapter now in our Learning AutoCAD course, and what we're going to look at is annotating simple designs. Now, in order to annotate and use text on your AutoCAD drawings, you need a text style. Now, we've got a new drawing for you. It's called annotation.dwg. As usual, download it from the library to follow along with the videos. And you'll see that we're on the text layer in the Layers panel on the Home tab. Make sure that you've got the text layer set as your current drafting layer. Now, in order to generate a text style, you can do it in two ways. You can go to the Annotate tab on the ribbon, and you can go here. You can click here to go to your text style manager. You can also now go here and manage text styles there. That takes you to text style as well. Or on the Home tab, you can also go to Annotation here and select this icon here. That'll also open up the text style dialog box. So 3 different ways to get there, and that doesn't even include the keyboard commands as well. So you'll notice when you open up the text style manager, you've got the annotative text style and the standard text style. Those are the ones that come with AutoCAD. You don't need to change either of those. What we're going to do is create a new text style that works in our particular drawing, our annotation drawing. So I'm going to basically click on the new button, quick and easy, and we're going to call it training just to be imaginative. And I'll click on OK. That adds it to the list on the left, and make sure it is selected in the list on the left. Now, the font name by default for the standard one and annotative is Arial, but we want to use the Verdana font. So I click on the drop down here, and instead of scrolling all the way down, just press the V key on your keyboard. Takes you to the first one that begins with V, which funnily enough is Verdana. Now, because it's a true type font, I can have things like regular, bold, italic, and so on. I want it to be italic, like so. I'm not going to make it annotative. We'll worry about annotative scaling later. And I'm going to leave it at a height of 0. That means that AutoCAD will prompt you for the text height when you use the text commands, when you're placing text. You can also add effects to the text. I can have it upside down. I can have it backwards if I want to, like so. I'll switch those off. I can change the width factor to say 0.5 and squish it together. Let's set that back to 1. And oblique angle, I can say 45 degrees. And as you can see, puts it all at 45 degrees. I'll set that back to 0. So as you can see there, there's our new text style all set up. I'm going to apply those settings. Now you'll notice there's no OK in the dialog box. But before we go anywhere, make sure we select training and set it as the current text style. Then click on close. You'll then notice when you go to the drop down here in the annotation panel in the Home tab, training is our current text style. If I go to the Annotate tab, training is our current text style. Let's go back to the Home tab now as well. So what we've done there is we've set up a new text style ready to place our text on it in the annotation.dwg drawing. In the previous video, we set up our training text style, and we're still in the annotation.dwg file. What we want to do now is place some text in the drawing using our text style. So in the Home tab on the ribbon, just check in the Layers panel that you are using the text layer. If you're not, just select text there and make sure that text is the current drafting layer. Now, you can create text in a number of different ways. I can do it from the Annotate tab and select here either multi-line text or single-line text. Or I can go to the Home tab on the ribbon and select text or multi-line text, single-line text here in the Annotation panel on the Home tab on the ribbon. So there's ways and means of getting to it quickly and easily. Now, we're going to place single-line text first. So I'm going to go to the Home tab, and in the Annotation panel, click on the flyout here. Now, before I do that, quickly check in the Annotation flyout that training is your current text style. If it isn't, click on the flyout arrow and select training here, like that. Then click on the flyout here and select single line text. It asks for a start point of the text, so I'm going to start down here, roughly about there, and click once. Then it will prompt me for the height of the text. I'm going to say 50 units in this case and press enter. Now, the rotation angle of the text will be 0, which goes to the right horizontally. So just press enter to confirm the default 0, and you should see a little flashing cursor appear. Now, this is a bolting plate, so I'm going to type in some text, bolting plate, like that. Press enter once, it takes me to the next line of single line text. So there's the next line. Plan like that because it's a plan view, so I might put view in there, plan view like that, to explain that it's a plan view. Now this is single line text, so I press enter again, prompts me for another line. If I don't want another line, just press enter with no text on the line, and it comes out of the text command, the single line text command. Now you can see that that is one object, and that is one object. So each line of text with single line text is an individual AutoCAD object. If you select it, you can see that it's got one grip there and can be moved. If I double click on it, you'll see that I can edit the text in place like so. So that's single line text placed in your AutoCAD drawing. Just pan across a little bit now so that the bolting plate and the single line text are over to the left. We're going to place some notes over here on the right hand side. Making sure that we're still using our text layer, making sure that we're still using our training text style, go to the text drop down here and select multi-line text this time. Now you'll notice there's a little ABC on your crosshair. That is a preview of the size of your multi-line text. Multi-line text, you specify an area where the text is going to go. So I'm going to click here and just drag an area out like that and click again like so. As soon as you do that, you'll get this editor with a little ruler appear, and you'll notice that your text editor tab, your contextual tab, appears on the ribbon. Now, the good thing is it's remembered that the single line text that you placed was 50 high. You'll notice over here in style that it's picked up on that and the 50 is there. You'll also notice that the current text style is training, which is great. Now, multi-line text is a bit like using a word processor inside AutoCAD. So I'm now going to type notes, because this is where my notes are going to go, and you'll notice that nothing appears. Make sure that you click in the editor a couple of times and then start typing, because sometimes you can click away from it and the editor's still there, but you're not typing in the editor because you haven't made it current. So just make sure that you click in the editor before you start typing. So there's notes and colon. Press enter now, and this time it drops you another line down in the area where you're placing your multi-line text. Now what you might do here is you might want some numbered notes. So in the text editor tab, I can go into the paragraph panel, select bullets and numbering and select numbered, and there's my number 1. So we might say all dims in millimeters and then full stop. Press enter, goes to the next number down, just like it would in Microsoft Word. So then you might also say there that it's material steel, perhaps because it's a bolting plate, like that. So there's material steel as well. You might put another full stop in there just to be grammatically correct. Now I'm going to highlight the word notes. I'm going to make that bold by clicking on the bold button, and I'm going to click on the U and underline it as well. When I click away from that text now, it places it in the drawing. I can hover over it, highlight it, double click on it. It opens up the editor again. It also opens up the text editor tab on the ribbon. So I can just hit escape there, and that will obviously deselect it, or I can double click on it and click away from it, and that will also deselect it. So that's single line text and multi-line text in your simple AutoCAD annotation.dwg file. We're staying in our annotation.dwg file with our multi-line text and our single line text. Now, in order to place that text, we created a text style. What we're going to look at now is creating a dimension style to place the other type of annotation, dimensions. Dimensions are fundamental to AutoCAD to allow you to communicate your design intent. So the idea being your dimensions would tell a manufacturer how big this bolting plate is, and would also give him the diameter or radii of the holes in the plate as well. Now, in order to create a dimension style, you can do it from the Annotate tab here on the ribbon, and you can go to Dimensions here, click on the little sort of 45-degree arrow, and that opens up the Dimension Style Manager. I'll close that for the moment. I can also go back to the Home tab, go to the Annotation flyout, and select this icon here. That will also open up the Dimension Style Manager. Now, I'm going to work from the Annotate tab on the ribbon. Now, the reason I'm going to do that is because in the Dimensions panel, if I want to place any dimensions, I've got this fantastic Dimension Layer Override. So I can actually specify that I want all my dimensions to go on the Dimensions layer. It overrides the current drafting layer, which in the Home tab is the text layer. It's a very useful tool. So I always dimension from the Annotate tab on the ribbon. Now, in order to generate a dimension style, it's a little bit complex, and I just want to take you through that and create a very simple dimension style for you to use in the annotation.dwg file. So we'll click on the little 45-degree arrow, and that brings up our Dimension Style Manager. Now, we're not going to use any of the current default dimension styles. We're going to create our own. So we're going to click on New, and the new style name will be Training, like so. We're going to start with ISO 25. The reason being is that is a metric dimension style, and we're using millimeters for this particular drawing. I am not going to make it annotative. We'll look at annotative scaling later, and we are going to use it for all dimensions. So I click on Continue. That'll bring up the new dimension style dialog box. Now, this is where we need to work through everything quickly, effectively, and simply to obviously give us a nice, simple, effective dimension style. So we're going to start with the Lines tab. Now, dimension lines are these lines underneath the dimension values in the preview. I always set everything to by layer, so it always adopts the properties of the dimensions layer. Baseline spacing, if I'm using millimeters, I'm going to make that say 10 millimeters, for example. Extension lines, again, set it all to by layer. So it's all adopting the dimensions layer properties, like so. Extend beyond dimension lines is this little extension here in the preview. I'm going to make that 2 millimeters, then press Tab. You'll see it get longer. And then the offset from origin is this little gap between the corners of the shape and the ends of these extension lines on the dimensions. I'm going to set that to 4 and press Tab, and you'll see that distance obviously get bigger. We don't need fixed length extension lines in this particular instance, so I'm going to go to the Symbols and Arrows tab. Now you'll notice that there are lots of different types of arrowheads. Some of them can be ticks or obliques or open symbols or origin symbols and so on. Just stick with closed filled for now. And leader lines, sometimes I use a dot, a small dot. It's up to you, or you can use an open dot, perhaps, like so. Arrow size, I'm going to increase that to say 3.5 millimeters in this case. You can use center marks for things like radii and diameters, or you can set it to none. I'm going to set it to none in this case. Dimension break, if you're breaking dimensions, 3.75 millimeters works. The arc length symbol is going to be preceding any dimension text. Radius jog dimension, well, if we're using any of those, I'll leave the jog angle at 45 degrees. And the linear jog dimension is 1.5 times the text height. That's all good. Let's go to the Text tab now. We're going to use the standard text style. That's the one that is already there, or we could use Training. And that would basically adopt to the Verdana italic that we had going. It's entirely up to you which one you use. Text color, again, by layer. Now you can have a fill color behind the text like that, or you can set it to none, which is what I do most of the time. Text height, I'm going to make that 3.5 millimeters in this case. When I hit Tab, you'll see that obviously gets bigger in the preview. Text placement is vertically above the dimension line. Horizontally, it's centered on the dimension line. I could change that and have it over extension line 1 or something else, centered again like that. I can also put it centered in the dimension if I want to. Ideally, put it above. It tends to look neater. Offset from the dimension line, I normally have that about 1.5 millimeters. That's the text above the dimension line. So you'll see it's this distance here. Text alignment, you can have it all horizontal. You can have it all aligned with your dimension lines, or you can set it to the ISO standard where things like radii and diameters have this horizontal crank on the dimension. Personally, I prefer aligned with dimension line. In the Fit tab, all of this will leave as is. It's not annotative, so annotative is not ticked. We then go to the primary units. So these would be decimal. It's a metric drawing after all. And the precision there, you can set it to whatever precision you like. You can have no decimal places and it will round it to the nearest whole number, or you can have one decimal place perhaps, like so. I'm going to set it to one decimal place, and I'm going to set the decimal separator there to a period, full stop, decimal place, like we would use normally in a metric drawing. Now, everything else here you don't need to worry about. Zero suppression trailing will round off the trailing zeros. So for example there, you'll see that that is exactly 60 degrees, so it doesn't need the 0.0 after it. So it basically suppresses it, the trailing zero. Decimal degrees there, I would give that a precision of maybe one decimal place as well. And notice now, if I suppress that there, the trailing zero is suppressed, as are the length dimensions as well. I can go to alternate units. I can display alternate units if I wish. So if I did that and set it to, say, architectural, you'll see there that it's now got the inches showing up next to the metric millimeters. I'm going to switch that off for now. And tolerances, if you had any cutting tolerances or tolerances for size, you could apply a different tolerance method. Let's say the limits method, for example, and you can see you've got different limits there if you need them. I'm going to set that to none as well and then click on OK. So we now have our training dimension style all set up. It's a very simple dimension style, and we're going to select it in the list, set it as the current style, and click on Close. You'll notice now that training up here in the dimensions panel in the Annotate tab is the current dimension style. If I go to the Home tab on the ribbon, click on the Annotation panel on the flyout, you'll see training is also the current dimension style there too. So you can see that training now is the current text style. It's also the current dimension style based on the dimension style we've just created. We're staying in our annotation.dwg file, and we now have a dimension style all set up like we set up in the previous video. So what we want to start thinking about now is placing some dimensions on the annotation.dwg file. Now we're going to do that. Now you'll notice I'm in the Home tab on the ribbon. In the Layers panel here, the current drafting layer is text. Always set it to your dimensions layer if you're placing dimensions. But don't forget, in the Annotate tab, you can also use your dim layer override to make sure that dimensions is always the dimensions layer as well. Now, personally, I prefer to dimension from the dimensions panel on the Annotate tab on the ribbon. You can dimension from the Home tab here. You'll see that you've got your dimension commands there, and you've got the dimension multiple dimension command there as well. You've also got them over here on the Annotate tab. There's the multiple dimension and there's the dimensions there, but I just like to have more control in the dimensions panel on the Annotate tab. It's entirely up to you. So what we're going to do now is place a few dimensions into the AutoCAD drawing. So you can use this tool here. If you click on dimension and perhaps hover over this line here, can you see as you start to hover, you start to see the dimensions appear. So I'm going to go to this one here and just click and then drag. And that allows me to place a dimension like so. Now all I've done there is selected a line, and can you see it's actually dimensioning that line? I'll just hit escape now to cancel that particular command. If I want to place a linear dimension, I go to linear on the flyout there, use the endpoint snap, drag upwards, click again to place the dimension line. Now you will notice that these dimensions seem incredibly small. If you zoom in on the end, on the extension line there, there's the arrowhead. If I bring that in, there we go. There's the arrowhead that we specified. If I zoom out, pan across, zoom in, there's my dimension there. It's 1402.1. But the text is very small. That's because at the moment we're using an annotation scale down here of 1 to 1. So all our dimensions are actually full size based on the units we specified in the dimension style. Don't worry about that. We'll cover that later on in this course. Zoom in towards the middle of the drawing, the three holes now. And what we'll do is we'll place a radius on the first circle. So just click on the circle, drag the radius dimension out and click. We'll do the same again. We'll do a diameter and we'll click on this circle here and place the diameter there. You can line them in if you wish, but you can see the differences between the two. What I'll also do as well is do an angular dimension, and we'll select 2 lines. We'll go for that line there, and there's our angular dimension there. If I zoom in, you can see it's 120 degrees. Now, these dimensions, like I said, are small. Don't worry about them being small. The annotation and the annotation scaling will be covered later on in the course. We're staying in our annotation.dwg file, and we're going to place another type of annotation now into our drawing, and that's an AutoCAD table. So we're going to go to the Home tab on the ribbon. We're going to click on Layer Properties in the Layers panel, and we're going to click on this icon here and create a new layer, and we're going to call it Tables, like so. And then what we'll do is we'll click on the color, and we'll make it red, this color here, and click on OK. Make sure it's continuous line type, and then just double click on this little piece of paper here, and you can see that makes Tables the current drafting layer. Close the Layer Properties Manager. What we're going to do now is just place a default table in the drawing. I'm going to pan across a little bit like so and use the left-hand side here. Now, the Tables panel is on the Annotate tab on the ribbon, like so. And it's right over here. There's Tables there. You can, on the Home tab also, though, place a table. It's here on the Annotation panel, like so. But if you want to work with your table styles and things, Annotate is the best tab to be in, because then you can click here and set up specific table styles if you wish. I'll close that for now. We're just going to use the default style. So I click here, select table using the standard table style. Now you can see there's the table style listed. We're going to start from an empty table, but it can be data linked and can also be basically linked to object data in the drawing if you wish. Our insertion behavior, we're going to specify an insertion point, or you can fit it to a specific window. We're going to have 4 columns, like so, and a column width nicely rounded to say 75 millimeters. And we're going to go for 3 data rows, each of 1 line in height. The cell styles, we're going to have a title bar, header bars, and then the data underneath in the table. Click on OK, and you'll see your table appear like so. I'm going to position it over here to the left and click like that. Now, as soon as I do that, you'll see the text editor tab appear on the ribbon, and we get this great big editing bar like so with a flashing cursor. Just click away from it to place the table first, then zoom in, and then pan and zoom so it fits the screen, and then double click in the title bar. So now we can start putting information in. So this will be our dimensions table. And then if I press tab, that'll take me to the first header. So that will be part name. Like so, I'll tab across, and then we might have something like diameter. Tab across, we might have radius as another header, like so. Make sure you spell it right, unlike me. And then we might also have part number. So part number like so. Pressing tab again, we might then have a part name of, say, bolt hole 1. And then if I use the down arrow on the keyboard, I can put in bolt hole 2, etc. And then go down to the last one, bolt hole 3. So I've placed some information in there. Click away from the table, and that will update the table accordingly. Just double click on the wheel now to zoom extents. And you can see now that we've got a drawing with bolting plate in plan view. It's got dimensions. It's got single line text, multi-line text, and an AutoCAD table in place. So what we're going to look at in the next chapter of this Learning AutoCAD course is taking all of this information, our design intent, and placing it into a professional looking AutoCAD drawing.